Is capitalism bad for you? Picture yourself as a laborer in a field picking turnips. You're compelled to increase your production. Perhaps you're worried about keeping your job. Perhaps you're worried that other people are working harder than you. The important thing is this: you have to pick more turnips. You can't stop now, no matter what. Where might this anxiety come from? For sociologist Carl Emil Maximilian Max Weber, modern capitalism differs from Marx's theory. Workers are not simply alienated, they are subject to a process that strips them of their very humanity. For Weber, capitalism is an iron cage that exposes workers to incapacitating anxiety, all for the accumulation of profit.
And the thesis there is that in many ways the form of this current crisis is dictated very much by the way we came out of the last one. That the problem back in the 1970s was excessive power of labour in relationship to capital. That therefore the way out of the crisis last time was to discipline labour. And we know how that was done. It was done by offshoring, it was done by, Thatcher and Reagan, and it was done by neoliberal doctrine, it was done all kinds of different ways. But by 1985 or 86, the labour question had essentially been solved for capital. It had access to all of the world's labour supplies. Nobody in this particular instance has cited greedy unions as the root of the crisis. Nobody in this instance is saying it has anything to do with excessive power of labour. If anything, it's the excessive power of capital, and in particular the excessive power of finance capital, which is the root of the problem. Now, how did that happen? Well, we've been, since the 1970s, in a phase of what we call wage repression, that wages have remained stagnant. The share of wages in national income right throughout the OECD countries has steadily fallen. It's even steadily fallen in China, of all places. So that there are less and less being paid out in wages. Well, wages turn out to be also the money which buys goods. So if you diminish wages, then you've got a problem with where's your demand going to come from? And the answer was, well, get out your credit cards. We'll give everybody credit cards. So we'll overcome, if you like, the problem of effective demand by actually pumping up the credit economy. And American households, British households have all roughly tripled their debt over the last 20, 30 years. And a vast amount of that debt, of course, has been within the housing market. And out of this comes a theory which is very, very important, that capitalism never solves its crisis problems. It moves them around geographically. And what we're seeing right now is a geographical movement of that. Everybody says, well, okay, everything's beginning to recover in the United States, and then Greece goes bang, and everybody says, what about the pigs, And it's interesting. You had a finance crisis, which is in the financial system. You've sort of half solved that, but at the expense of a sovereign debt crisis. Actually, if you look at the accumulation process of capital, you see a number of limits and a number of barriers. And there's a wonderful language that Marx uses in the Grundrisse, where he talks about the way in which capital cannot abide a limit. It has to turn it into a barrier which it then circumvents or transcends. And then when you look at the accumulation process, you look at where the barriers and limits might lie. And the simple way to look at it is to say, look, the typical circulation process of accumulation goes like this. You start with some money, you go into the market and you buy labour, power and means of production, and you put them to work with a given technology and organisational form. You create a commodity which you then sell for the original money plus a profit. Now, you then take part of the profit and you recapitalise it into an expansion for very interesting reasons. Now, there are two things about this. One is there are a number of barrier points in here. How is the money got together in the right place at the right time in the right volume? And that takes financial ingenuity. So the whole history of capitalism has been about financial innovation. And financial innovation has the effect of also empowering the financiers. And the excessive power of the financiers can sometimes, they do get greedy, no question about it. And if you look at financial profits in the United States, they were soaring after 1990. They're going up like this. Profits in manufacturing were coming down like this. And you could see the imbalance. In this country, I think the way in which this country has sided with the City of London against British manufacturing since the 1950s onwards has had very serious implications for the economy of this country. You've actually screwed industry in order to keep, financiers happy. any sensible person right now would join an anti-capitalist organisation. And you have to. Because otherwise we're going to have the continuation. And notice it's a continuation of all sorts of negative aspects. For instance, the racking up of wealth. You would have thought the crisis would have stopped that. Actually, more billionaires emerged in India last year than ever. They doubled last year. The wealth of the rich, I just read something this morning, in this country has accelerated. Just last year, what happened was the leading hedge fund owners got personal remunerations of $3 billion each in 1 year. Now, I thought it was obscene and insane a few years ago when they got 250 million. But they're now hauling in 3 billion. Now, that's not a world I want to live in, and if you want to live in it, be my guest. I don't see us debating and discussing this. I don't have the solutions. I think I know what the nature of the problem is. And unless we're prepared to have a very broad-based discussion that gets away from, the normal kind of pablum you get in the political campaign and, everything's going to be okay here next year if you vote for me, it's crap. You should know it's crap and say it is. And we have a duty, it seems to me, those of us who are academics and seriously involved in the world, to actually change our mode of thinking.